The lights in the observation deck had been dimmed to near nothing, because someone decided that if the creature could not see them clearly, it might stay calm. It was a small comfort, a foolish one, but nobody said so out loud. The creature filled the containment bay the way a storm fills a valley, not by treeing, but simply by existing. It was 30 meters from the tips of its front claws to the base of its long, armored tail. 6 limbs. For walking, twofold, close to its chest like a bird holding its wings tight. The plating across its back was dark gray, almost black, layered like old bark on an ancient tree. And across that dark surface, slow and steady, light moved, blue and gold, pulsing in long, quiet waves. Over and over, the same pattern, cycling without end. Nobody in the observation deck spoke. Behind the reinforced glass, 18 scientists and officers from 9 different species stood in a row and stared. Some had their arms crossed. Some held data pads they had forgotten to read. One Veth diplomat near the back had not blinked in 4 minutes. Admiral Bova broke the silence first. He was a tall man, broad across the shoulders, with the kind of voice that had spent 30 years giving orders and expected them followed. He stood at the center of the glass and looked at the creature the way someone looks at a fire that has already burned down 3 buildings. 72 hours, he said. That is what the council approved. Not a single minute more. Counselor Lyra of the Veth stood beside him. She was small and thin, with pale gray skin and large dark eyes that caught every detail in a room without seeming to look directly at anything. She nodded slowly, but said nothing. At the far end of the observation row, away from the others, stood Dara Osei. She was not watching the creature the way the others were. She was not gripping a railing. She was not leaning back from the glass. She stood with a small recording device in one hand and a worn notebook in the other, and she was writing slowly, carefully. Her eyes moved between the creature and the page in steady, unhurried intervals. She was the one who had asked for the 72 hours. The data files on the creature were long and grim. The Kroth, that was the classification, had been engineered during the Void Wars centuries ago by a civilization whose name most species had agreed to stop using. Living weapons, built to destroy and move on. They had torn through 16 colony worlds before the war ended, and the civilization that made them was erased from the stars. Every Kroth found since then had been destroyed immediately, without study, without debate. The files call them Chaos Bringers. The classification had never been questioned, until Dara submitted her request. She had been watching the recorded footage for 6 days before the station was even assembled around the sleeping creature. Footage captured by a deep survey drone near the Dead Star Vel 9, where the creature had been found drifting, alive, dormant, and alone. And in all that footage, across hundreds of hours of recording, Dara had noticed one thing that the drone's automated systems had flagged as irrelevant background data. The light patterns on its body were not random. They repeated, exactly, every 40 seconds, the same sequence of blue and gold, with tiny variations at the end, like a sentence that keeps almost finishing but never quite does. She had brought that observation to the council with 300 pages of supporting notes. The council had given her 72 hours as a compromise between the scientists who were curious and the admirals who were afraid. Dr. Wiel, the council's chief containment officer, stopped beside her now. He was a heavy-set alien of the Drev species, gray-skinned and slow-moving, with a habitoff breathing loudly through his wide nostrils whenever he thought someone was wasting his time. "You are writing by hand," he said. "I think better that way." Dara replied without looking up. "It is a Kroth," he said. "There is nothing to write that the files have not already recorded." She did not answer. She marked something in the notebook and underlined it twice. The creature shifted in the containment bay. Not much. One of its large front limbs moved slowly, like a person rolling over in sleep. The bioluminescent pattern rippled, broke briefly, then resumed its cycle. Blue and gold. The same 40-second loop. Several people stepped back from the glass. Dara stepped forward. She pressed her fingertip to the cold surface and traced the light as it moved across the creature's back. Her lips moved slightly, counting the seconds between each variation in the pattern. and she stopped and wrote something new in her notebook. She circled it, and she circled it again. Behind her, Admiral Bova was reviewing the termination protocol with two officers. Counselor Lyra was sending a quiet message to the council via her wrist communicator to Dr. Will had gone back to his datapad. None of them noticed what Dara had written. Two words, circled twice in worn ink at the bottom of the page. It is calling. She closed the notebook, looked through the glass at the slow pulse of light moving across the creature's dark body, and said nothing to anyone. The countdown to termination was already running. 68 hours and 40 minutes remaining. She had work to do. The request reached Admiral Bova's desk at 0200 station time, and by 02:15 the lights in the briefing room were on and 4 people were arguing. Dara stood at the end of the table with her notebook open and her recording device running. She had not slept. She did not look like someone who planned to. "You want to go inside?" Admiral Bova said. He said it the way someone repeats something they cannot believe they heard correctly. "Yes," Dara said. "Into the containment bay." "Yes." "With the Croth. It has a designation number. I have been calling it Subject 1, but I would prefer it is a Chaos Bringer," Dr. Wiel said from his seat near the wall. "That is not a name. That is a warning. Every crew that has ever entered a room with a living Croth did not come back out. That is not a record with exceptions. Those encounters were different," Dara said. "In every recorded case, the Croth was either in active combat mode or had been disturbed from feeding. This one has been dormant for an estimated 40 to 60 years. It is not hunting. It isn't feeding. It is broadcasting." She pulled up her data on the wall screen. The bioluminescent pattern played on a loop, blue and gold, cycling every 40 seconds, with a small variation at the end that she had marked in her notebook. "I have cross-referenced this sequence against 17 extinct Void War language databases and 4 known Croth behavioral records. Records that were filed and then buried because no one thought they mattered. This is not aggression signaling. It is not territorial warning. The closest match in any known communication framework is what the Veth call a resonance call. A signal sent out repeatedly, looking for a response." Counselor Lyra, who had been quiet in the corner of the room, raised her head slowly. "Looking for a response from whom?" she asked. Dara let the silence sit for a moment. "From whoever made it," she said. "The civilization that engineered the Croth was destroyed at the end of the Void Wars. Every individual of that species is gone. Every structure, every station, every signal beacon, gone. This creature has been drifting in the dark near a dead star for approximately 200 years, sending the same call every 40 seconds to a civilization that no longer exists." Nobody spoke. Dr. Wiel breathed loudly through his nostrils. Admiral Bova looked at the screen, and then at Dara, and then at the screen again. "That does not change what it is," he said finally. "Grief, if that is even what this is, does not make it safe." "No," Dara agreed, "but it changes what it is doing. There is a difference between a weapon that is hunting and a weapon that is waiting for something that will never come. I am not asking for its release. I am asking to go in, stand in the same space, and respond to the signal with a light array. Mirroring, to see if it registers another presence." Counselor Lyra straightened slightly. Dara had noticed over 2 days that Lyra always straightened when something became politically interesting. "If it responds to directed communication," Lyra said slowly, "that changes its council classification. Which is why I want to know before the 72 hours end," Dara said. The vote among the 4 of them was not clean. Admiral Boba voted no. Dr. Wheel abstained, which Dara had expected. Counselor Lyra voted yes for reasons that had nothing to do with the creature's well-being, which Dara had also expected. The deciding approval came from the station commander, who sent a one-line message from his quarters. "Give the xenobiologist her hour. Full kill switch active." Dara was in the containment bay entrance 30 minutes later. The bay was cold. It smelled like old metal and something she had no word for. Not bad, just old. Like a room that had been sealed for a very long time. She walked in slowly, light array in hand, and stopped 12 meters from the creature. It was still. Its eyes, 2 on the front of its wide, flat head, 2 more on the sides, were open. It had been watching the door since she entered. She did not run. She did not raise the array yet. She stood still and counted the seconds. 39. 40. The pattern moved across its back, blue and gold. She raised the array and mirrored it back. Same timing, same color sequence. The creature did not move for 4 full seconds. Then its head turned. Not fast, not sudden. The way a person turns when they hear their name spoken in a voice they had stopped expecting to hear. It looked at her directly. The bioluminescent pattern broke. Not an alarm. Not the sharp spike the files described as an attack warning. It broke the way a sentence breaks when the speaker forgets what they were going to say. And then it shifted. The gold faded out slowly. What replaced it was a soft, steady white, low and quiet and still. A color that appeared in none of the void war behavioral records Dara had studied. She did not move. She kept the array trained on it and kept breathing. Behind the glass, the observation deck was completely silent. Dara wrote one word in her notebook without looking down at the page. Aware. Nobody told Run she was not allowed near the observation deck. That was the mistake. She was 8 years old, and she had been on outpost on for 4 days because the research posting had come up suddenly and the nearest family housing on the transit station was full and her mother had run out of other options. She had a small bunk in the crew quarters, a bag of school tablets she was mostly ignoring, and absolutely nothing to do while her mother worked. She found the observation deck on her second day by following a Drev technician who did not notice he had company. She had looked through the glass for a long time without saying anything. Then she had come back the next day, and the day after. Nobody thought to stop her because she was quiet and small, and most of the crew had too many other things to think about. On the morning of the third day, while Dara was inside the containment bay for her second session and the scientists were huddled over their data feeds, Rin pressed both hands flat against the observation glass and stared. The creature was looking toward her mother. But then, maybe because Run had Medea's small sound, or maybe for no clear reason at all, its head turned. It looked at her. Rin did not step back. She raised one hand and waved. Slowly, the way she waved at neighbors from a window at home. Inside the bay, Dara saw it happen from the side. She saw Sargo's head turn. She saw the light pattern on its back change in a way she had not recorded before. Green entered the pattern for the first time. Soft and steady, spreading from the base of its neck down across its shoulders like sunlight moving across a field. She checked her notes on the way out, hands moving fast through the pages. Green was listed in only one void war behavioral file she had found, a partial record, damaged and incomplete, from a research post that no longer existed. The researcher had noted it once and never elaborated. Green, response to detected juvenile presence. Function, unclear. Dara stood in the corridor outside the bay for a moment with that page open. Then she looked up at her daughter through the glass and felt something cold and careful settle in her chest. She went back to work. The sessions continued. Each morning, Dara entered the bay with the light array and spent 2 hours in slow, careful exchange with the creature. She had started calling it Sargo in her notes. Not officially, not out loud to the others, just privately, because Subject 1 felt like a word for something already dead. Sargo was learning faster than she had expected. By the second session, it had stopped repeating the old 40-second call signal.b. By the third session, it was responding to her array prompts within seconds. The white, the color she had first seen when it recognized her presence, had become a baseline. It returned to white the way a person returns to a neutral expression between reactions. She was building a vocabulary. Slowly, carefully, not words, feelings. She would broadcast a long, slow pulse calm. Sargo would receive it, pause, and return white or sometimes a deep, steady blue that she had begun to read as something like steady. Grounded, still here. She would broadcast a short, sharp flash, sudden change. Sargo would go tense, plates pulling close, and return a quick red-orange she categorized as alarm. She tried green herself on the fourth day. She had configured the array to produce it and aimed it carefully. Sargo went very still. Then it turned and looked at the observation window. Not at Dara, at the window, at Run, who was standing there with her hands pressed to the glass. Sargo returned green, fuller and brighter than before. Behind the safety of the observation glass, several alien crew members who had been watching quietly exchanged looks. One of them left and came back with two more colleagues. Nobody said anything. They just watched. Dr. Wiel appeared at Dara's shoulder when she exited the bay that afternoon. The green response, he said, without greeting her. It is consistent. Yes, Dara said. It happens every time the child is at the window. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. She could hear him breathing. I pulled the partial void war file, he said. The one with the green classification. And another pause. Longer this time. The researcher wrote a second note, he said. It was in a corrupted data section. I had our system recover it this morning. He held out his data pad. She read it. Green, response to detected juvenile presence. Observed consistently across all Croth subjects in the program. Program notes indicate this response was engineered deliberately. Croth were designed to destroy military targets, infrastructure, and adult combatants. The engineers did not want their weapons killing children by accident. So they built in a stop, a recognition signal, a pause. They built the protection in from the start. Dara read it twice. Then she handed the pad back without a word and walked to the observation window. Rin was there. Sargo was there. The green light moved between them quietly through the reinforced glass, back and forth, like a conversation between two people who did not need the same language to understand each other. 40 hours remained on the termination countdown. Dara went back to her notebook and began writing faster. The strike hit the station at 0318. It was small, a fragment of rock no bigger than a storage crate, traveling at the kind of speed that turns small things into catastrophic ones. The outer sensor array should have caught it. The outer sensor array had been flagged for maintenance for 11 days, and nobody had gotten to it yet. The impact punched a breach in the hull of Section 7. Emergency bulkheads were supposed to seal automatically. Two of them did. The third, the one between the connecting corridor and the observation deck approach, fired its magnetic locks, jammed on debris in the track, and sealed at only a third of its travel. That left a gap. Not big, just enough. The pressure alarms went off across the entire station at once. In the crew quarters, people grabbed emergency suits from the wall racks and ran for sealed sections. In the command deck, the station commander was already pulling up the breach schematic and shouting orders into his communicator. In the observation corridor, the one that ran past the containment bay window, Run was alone. She had woken up when the impact shook the floor and knocked her school tablets off the bunk shelf. She had gone to the corridor because the observation deck was the only place on the station where she felt comfortable enough to think. She had not told her mother. Her mother had been asleep for 3 hours after 4 days of almost none. She was 20 meters from the jammed bulkhead when the pressure alarm sounded and the bulkhead came down behind her, the functioning one, the one on the other side. It sealed completely. Clean. Final. Rin stood in the corridor with the emergency lights turning everything red and the station shuddering around her and the air pressure dropping slowly, and she was old enough to understand what all of those things together meant. She did not scream. She stood very still and breathed and tried to think. The wall beside her groaned. The structural support between the corridor and the containment bay, already stressed by the impact vibration, developed a crack along its lower seam. Then another crack, higher up. Then the wall buckled outward and split along its full length and came away from the frame in 2 large sections. Sargo stepped through, not violently, not in a burst of aggression. One massive limb came through the gap first, bracing against the corridor wall. Then the rest of it followed, slow, careful, enormous, filling the corridor from wall to wall and floor to ceiling with dark armored plating and the quiet pulse of light across its back. The light was green. Rin looked up at it. It was the first time she had seen it without glass between them. It was much larger than it looked from the observation deck. Its head way sat the ceiling. Its smallest claw was bigger than her whole body. She raised her hand and waved. She did it without deciding to. It was just what she did every time when she saw it through the window. Her hand went up before her brain gave it any instruction. Sargo went still. The green light deepened. It spread from its shoulders down the full length of its body, from its neck to the tip of its tail, in one long, slow wave. Then it moved, not toward the breach, not toward the open corridor at the far end, not toward any exit. It turned. It lowered its body slowly, plates rasping softly against the corridor floor. And it curled. Its body bent in a long arc, its tail swinging around in a wide, deliberate motion, until Run was enclosed on 3 sides by living armor. The 4th side was the intact wall. It pressed the leading edge of its body flat against the corridor seam, where the breach was widest, blocking the pressure leak with its own mass. In the command deck, the station commander watched the containment bay camera cycle to static and pulled up the corridor feed. He stared at the image for 2 full seconds. "Kill switch," he said. "Override now." The technician hit the switch. Nothing happened. She hit it again. "The relay Insection 7 is offline. The meteorite took it out. We have no kill switch, sir." Admiral Bova, who had arrived at the command deck 30 seconds after the alarm, looked at the corridor feed and said nothing. Sargo had not moved. It held its position against the breach, pressed tight, green light moving steadily across its back. Inside the arc of its body, in a pocket of stable pressure, Rin sat with her knees pulled to her chest. She could feel its warmth through the air. She watched the green light move, and after a while she stopped shaking. The rescue team cut through the sealed bulkhead 19 minutes later. They came in fast with emergency gear and weapons drawn and stopped completely when they saw what was in the corridor. Sargo turned its head. It looked at the team. Then it looked at Run. Then it straightened slowly, pulling back from the breach, and stepped to the side. The green light did not go out. Rin stood up, walked past the rescue team, and looked back at it once before they guided her through the bulkhead door. She pressed her hand flat against the corridor wall as she passed, the closest surface between them. Sargo's light pulsed once, bright and full, and then settled back to its quiet, steady green. The footage was 43 seconds long. It showed a dark corridor lit in emergency red, a small human child sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, and a 30-meter Croth-class creature curled around her like a wall, holding position against a pressure breach, keeping her alive, making no attempt to move toward any exit, even though the corridor had been open and unobstructed for 11 full minutes before the rescue team arrived. The Galactic Council watched it 12 times in the first hour. Then they began arguing, and they did not stop for most of the day. The session was held by holographic link from the Council's main chamber, with 9 species represented in seats around a long curved table and outposts dawn-patched in on a secondary feed. Dara sat at a small desk to the side with her notebook and her datapad and said nothing while the debate ran. The early part of the session went the way she expected. Admiral Bova presented the security case with the flat, precise tone of a man who had made up his mind before the meeting started. The Croth had breach containment. The kill switch had failed. The creature had been free in the station for 19 minutes with a child in its reach. That it had not killed the child was not evidence of safety. It was evidence of selective behavior, which in a weapon was more dangerous, not less. A Croth that knew when to appear harmless was a Croth that was still thinking tactically. Several council members from species with long void war histories nodded firmly. Then the Drev representative spoke. He was not Dr. Wiel. He was a senior council figure, older, slower, with a careful way of choosing words. He said that the footage should not be set aside as a performance. The Croth had been alone for 200 years. It had not been briefed on station protocols. It had not known the kill switch was offline until the rescue team confirmed it after the fact. The choice to shield the child had been made before freedom was guaranteed. That point landed quietly in the room and stayed there. Counselor Lyra spoke next. Dara had expected her to argue for preservation. She had been moving that direction for 2 days, but the reasoning she offered was entirely about leverage. A living Croth that could be studied, understood, and potentially directed was a strategic asset to the Council. Termination was wasteful. Control was preferable. It was the right conclusion for every wrong reason, and Dara let it sit without comment, because right now she needed votes, not agreement. The council chair turned to her. You have the last submission before voting. Dara stood. She did not bring up the footage again. She did not talk about the whole breach or the rescue team or the 19 minutes. She put her data on the screen and she talked about light. She walked through the full translation record, 48 hours of session data, every exchange, every response, every color, and its mapped meaning. She showed the progression from the old call signal to the white of recognition to the slow vocabulary they had built together over 3 days. She showed the green, its origin in Void War engineering records, its function, its consistency. Then she showed the last piece. This is the corridor feed from 0318, she said. I want you to watch the 9 seconds before the wall came down. The footage played. Sargo, still in containment, before the breach. The light on its back shifting, not the steady broadcast of the call signal, not the calm white off their sessions. Something new, fast and bright and green, moving in a pattern she had not seen in any of their exchanges. The wall came down at 0318 and 41 seconds, Dara said. This pattern began at 0318 and 32 seconds. 9 seconds before the breach. Before it was free. She let the room be quiet. It detected the pressure change, she said. It detected her presence in the corridor. It began moving before the wall was open. It was not responding to freedom that IT was responding to the child being in danger. Those are not the same decision that a tactical calculation waits to see the outcome before committing. What you are looking at committed first, Admiral Bova said. You cannot know its internal reasoning. No, Dara agreed. I cannot. But I can show you what it did when it thought Noon was watching and it had nothing to gain. And I'm asking you to weigh that against 200 years of an empty call signal going out into the dark with no answer. It is the last one. There are no others. And in 4 days, it has demonstrated more restraint, more awareness, and more deliberate choice than any Croth in recorded history. She paused. Give it the chance to show us more. The vote was 11-7 in favor of provisional living status. Not freedom, not trust. The containment bay would be repaired and reinforced. Monitoring would continue. The termination protocol would remain on file. But the countdown clock, which had been sitting at 6 hours and 12 minutes when the session began, was suspended. Dara returned to the containment bay alone after the session. Sargo's bay had been restored. It was inside, quiet, the bioluminescent pattern moving in the steady white of their baseline. She sat down on the floor against the far wall, inside the bay, and opened her notebook. Sargo watched her for a moment. Then it lowered its head slowly and set lead to the floor as well, large and unhurried, its light breathing in and out. She wrote for a long time. The station was quiet around them. Outside, the reinforced glass, the stars, did not move. Renamed it on a Tuesday. She had not asked anyone's permission. She had simply arrived at the observation window after her morning lessons with a piece of paper that she pressed flat against the glass, facing inward. On it she had written, in large, careful letters, Goro. She held it there until the creature turned its head and looked at it. Then she pointed at the creature and said the name out loud through the glass, even though she knew it could not hear her. Then she pointed at the paper. Then back at creature. Sargo looked at the paper. Then at her. Then at the paper again. Green. Nobody took the name out of the station logs when it started appearing there. Someone added it to the containment bay entry panel under the official designation number. Nobody took that down either. After 2 weeks, it had spread to the research reports. And after 3 weeks, Admiral Bova used it in a security briefing without appearing to notice he had done so. The station changed around Goro quietly and without anyone declaring that it was changing. The Drev technician who maintained the observation window seals started doing his morning checks 5 minutes early so he could be at the window when the bay lights came on. He never said why. He just stood there for a few minutes with a data pad. He was not reading while Goro's bioluminescent pattern moved slowly through its colors. He started calling those minutes the best part of his shift. 2 of the VETH researchers who had refused in the first week to work on any data directly related to Goro were now running the most detailed behavioral analysis on the station. They had developed a secondary color mapping system that ran parallel to Dara's, tracking micro-variations in the light patterns that were too small and fast for human eyes to catch without equipment. They presented their first report to Dara with the slightly embarrassed energy of people admitting they had changed their minds. Dr. Wiel said nothing about any of it, but Dara noticed that he had moved his primary workstation to a desk with a direct line of sight to the observation window. Rin came every day. She had developed a full private system of hand signals that she used through the glass. Not based on any research framework, just invented by an 8-year-old who wanted to talk and figured out her own way to do it. Goro responded to all of them. Green, white, blue. Sometimes a warm amber color that appeared only during her visits, and that the Veth researchers had flagged in their system with a note. Function not yet categorized. Possible contentment. Dara watched her daughter at the window one afternoon and thought about all the species in the Galactic Council who had looked at Goro and seen only the Void Wars, who had seen the engineering records and the casualty files and the word Chaosbringer and decided the word was the whole truth. She thought about how easy it was to read a file about something and believe you had seen it. Rin had not read any files. Rin had walked up to a window, seen something alive, and waved at it. The new council delegation arrived on a Thursday, for weeks after the vote. There were 6 of them, senior representatives from 4 species, a security assessor, and a documentation officer. They came to conduct the first formal review of Goro's provisional status. They had read every report. They had reviewed the footage. They arrived with the careful, reserved expressions of people who had already formed opinions and were willing to be slightly adjusted by what they found, but not significantly. Dara walked them to the observation deck. Goro was at the far end of the bay, resting. The light on its back was moving in the slow, quiet pattern that the research team had begun calling the ambient state, the one it returned to when nothing in particular was happening. White and low blue, moving like water. Then, Rin came around the corner with her school bag on her shoulder. She had not known the delegation was there. She stopped when she saw 6 strangers in the corridor, looked at them with brief 8-year-old assessment, decided they were not interesting, and walked to the window. She pressed her hand to the glass. She waved. Inside the bay, Goro lifted its head. The ambient pattern changed immediately. The shift was fast and unmistakable on the recording equipment that logged every millisecond. White gave way to green before Rin's hand had finished moving. And then the amber came, slow and warm, spreading from the base of Goro's neck down across its back and sides until the whole bay was lit in it. The creature rose from its resting position and moved toward the window. Not fast, not urgent, just deliberate. It stopped close to glass and lowered its head until it was level with the small human standing in the other side. Rin put both palms flat on the glass. Green and amber moved together in the space between them. The delegation did not speak for a long time. The security assessor was the first to find words. She turned to Dara and said quietly, "What does that color mean?" "The warm one." Dara looked at Goro. She looked at her daughter. She looked at the slow amber light moving through the bay like late afternoon through an open window. "The closest translation we have," she said, "is I see you. I will not let harm come to you." The documentation officer was already writing. On the final page of the delegation's formal report, filed 11 days later and entered into the Galactic Council's permanent record, the threat classification field for Croth designation Subject 1, Goro, had been crossed through with a clean line. Below it, in careful official script, someone had written, "Pending reclassification." And beneath that, in smaller letters, in the handwriting of the documentation officer who had stood at the observation window that Thursday afternoon and watched the amber light fill a containment bay, "Recommend protected status." The monster's hidden heart had not been hidden at all. It had been broadcasting for 200 years. The galaxy had simply never sent anyone willing to listen.